Yeah, it's great to see y'all here. I know this conference is well known for the last 20, 25 years as mainly touching on agronomic crops, but in my field where I work with commercial fruit and vegetable production the last 27 years with extension, I know there's a lot of interest from our traditional grain farmers who either have sons coming back to the farm or daughters or just trying to diversify their acreage to maybe some other types of crops. So this is a production technique that we've been looking at and doing a lot of work on since '96, I do believe. I got a picture in here of our first research we did down at Piketon. Like Curtis, I'm also an extension educator. I'm based out of two locations, though. I'm based out of Scioto County down in Portsmouth, right on the Ohio River. But then just a little bit north of there, we have the Piketon Research and Extension Center, and that's where I do all my research, and we do teaching and field days and so forth there. So that's where a lot of the work that we've started back in '96 on hoop houses began. And I guess they want a picture in there, so there's my ugly mug. But we are way down south. The southernmost research farm. Ohio State got ag research farms all over the state, but we're the southernmost one, but we're the only one that is both funded by research and extension. All the other ones are mainly funded by OARDC, the research arm of the university. So it's pretty neat because I can actually do these new crops research and new techniques, and I can either make mistakes and show they don't work or show that they do, and we can bring folks out to learn some of these new techniques. But there's our first tunnel. The topic's title was hoop houses, but the phrase that USDA has adopted to define what a hoop house is actually a high tunnel. Hey, how you doing? But really in '96, we didn't know. All we were after was a way to get early production. When you're growing in this produce market deal, the earlier you can get in, usually the higher prices, and the way to make money at this is consistent production year-round. So if we can come in 1 or 2 months later and go 1 or 2 months later on the end or 1 or 2 months earlier at the beginning of the season, we can do it. So we were actually, my farmers were wanting us to say, hey, how can we get strawberries earlier? And how can we grow tomatoes earlier? And can we get cucumbers any earlier? And raspberries, can we extend the season later on raspberries, especially fall-bearing red raspberries? So us having the ties to OARDC, I got wind that there was some old greenhouse cold frames that were part of a nursery project that were destined to the scrapyard. I got wind of it. We loaded up the gooseneck trailer in a pickup truck and headed up with my crew, and we actually salvaged this old high tunnel, or it was back in them days just a cold frame, but it's just some galvanized steel poles that we ended up building our first high tunnel. And really, one of the new things with high tunnels is you can move them. If you stick this thing in the ground permanently, just like all of us, we do crop rotation. When you sit in the ground permanently, you don't get that opportunity to rotate crops. And when you're dealing with any of these, strawberries, tomatoes, they all build up the same soil-borne pathogens. They all build up Phytophthora and Pythium and Rhizoctonia, so you really can't rotate out. We built ours on some big oak skids. We actually got these great big oak skids, built the greenhouse structure on that, used hurricane straps, or what they do is to hold down house trailers, use that to hold the thing down, and we could actually put 2 tractors on this then and drag it through the field. Well, just 10 years ago, somebody came up, we have a movable high tunnel. I said, we were doing that back in '96, so it's no big deal. But we didn't know they were called high tunnels back then. We just had this crazy idea to grow them inside a greenhouse and try to get earlier production out of them. There's other ways to extend the marketing season on produce, whether it's fruits or vegetables. And I should have thrown a picture in for you grain guys and girls. We actually have a great big 30 by 250 tunnel we're growing corn and soybeans in. I believe it's not for production purposes. We're actually testing some new micro-irrigation, micro-fertigation technology out of Japan, and we're mimicking a desert climate. So if you come down to my research farm, you'll actually see corn and soybeans growing in that. It's not for the production aspects. It's more to mimic the desert conditions that we're testing this on. So you can grow anything in a tunnel. We'll get to that in a little bit. But there's other methods, too, to increase your harvest season or your market season with fresh produce. Plasticulture, that's where we're just laying a piece of black plastic on the ground real tight against the soil. Just like when you put your hand on a black car in the summertime, the sun heats up that black car. Same thing we do with the black plastic, having the sun absorbing that heat and having it tight on the plastic. That heat is translocated into the soil, warms up your root system, gets you a little jump on the season. We can get early varieties using transplants. We can just jump the season there 40 days compared to a seed. Jamie and I were talking on the way up, cantaloupe. Usually we go with transplants on cantaloupe because that gets us about 30, 40 days jump, about a 3 or 4 week season jump on it by using transplants. Drip tape, plasticulture, we'll go over a little bit low tunnels, which are low hoop houses. Then we have the high tunnels, the ones we can walk in. Then we have row covers, which is just polypropylene material. If you ever tore open a baby diaper, that little white fluffy stuff that's inside a baby diaper, that's all it is. Kimberly-Clark, back 25 years ago, one of the manufacturers of baby diapers, came up with this technology where they use that same poly fiber that's in that baby diaper and just put it in big sheets at different thicknesses. So those are called floating row covers, and we can protect our crops, tender warm season vegetables, from frost and freeze events just by using those different weights of row covers. So we're going to go over some of the low to high dollar hoop houses, high tunnels. We're going to use high tunnels from here on out instead of hoop houses. But there's a lot of things, just like with any of our crops, we need to consider. Light, water, wind. I'll show you some pictures. One of my farmers up in Lake County, right on Lake Erie, has pretty well given up on high tunnels just because of the winds he gets coming in off of that lakefront. He can't keep them things down no matter how many hurricane straps he puts on them. So you need to consider that. There are different mulch colors. We can actually cool the soil. If we're growing cool season crops like broccoli or cabbage or cauliflower that don't want to be heated up, we could actually grow some those crops on white plastic, which actually reflects the light and cools the crop. So all kinds of things we can do to trick these. Then, just like in our field production, we got weeds, insects. Temperatures fluctuate a lot more in these tunnels. It could be 30 degrees out or 20 degrees out, but you get a nice sunny morning like we had yesterday morning. Even though it's 30 degrees out, it could be up to 80 or 90 in that high tunnel. And I'll explain why we can get that hot in these high tunnels. Then for fertility, varieties, just all that can help us extend that marketing season. The key with these high tunnels, though, is this passive heating. Just like when you go out, if it gets sunny today and you go into your car, it might be 30 degrees outside. You go in that car, though, it's going to be 50 degrees in there if it's a nice sunny day. Same thing we have going on here. It's that passive heating, the sun coming through the glass in the car. Here we're talking the poly in the high tunnels. It's capturing that heat. That's what's increasing the temperatures in there. And then we have crops growing in. They just start growing a little bit faster. And Curtis mentioned Dr. Matt Kleinhenz. Me and him have done a lot of workshops, trainings, and field research. Matt's our state horticulture specialist for extension for vegetable crops based out of our Worcester research facility. And back, 16 years ago maybe, we went on a road trip and we started introducing people to high tunnel production. So we were just doing high tunnel workshops all around the state just to help folks get started in this about 16 years ago. So it's not really new technology, but we're learning something new all the time, how to make this work. Adam Montre, he was up at Michigan State. He ran their organic vegetable farm. He did a lot of high tunnel hoop house research as well, and this is one of his facilities he has. When it comes to hoop houses, though, there's lots of manufacturers. We call them high tunnels. You can build them yourself. If you're a farmer engineer, it's no different than really building a barn. It's actually pretty simple. Or some of y'all might be using similar type structures for livestock production or to store equipment in. Basically the same type of structure that we have here. Most are anchored in the ground. Even if they are movable, we got to anchor them somehow or they will blow away. There's lots of heights, lots of lengths. Suzanne from Montgomery County, me and her have built some in downtown Dayton on some vacant lots there. I think I got a picture of it coming up here. So you can come up with any size, shape, form of these things to put on your particular operation. If you're really into this, we want to get major production. We can get them that we can actually drive tractors in them, and that's the ones that I like. All of mine, we've always been able to drive tractors in, maybe little tractors, but they're tractors that we can till the soil, throw up a bed, lay plastic, do whatever we wanted to, but do it from a tractor seat. Because these are passively heated, most are passively cooled, which means we have to do something. A traditional high tunnel has no electricity, no outside connections. It's just a structure with plastic put over it out in the field. So heating, like I said, can be a problem, especially on nice sunny days. So we can either do many things to keep these things vented. Put peak vents in them. I'll show you some pictures of peak vents. The biggest thing we do is roll up sides or drop down curtains. Back in '96, if you took a look at mine there, we did roll up sides. You just got a piece of plastic, you got a crank on there, big long piece of steel tubing, and when it started getting warm, you walked out there and you cranked it up. You know, big, little, depending on the day and how temperatures were going to be in there for the day. Since then, we've learned a lot. When you do roll-up sides, especially this time of the year, some of my farmers already have tomatoes planted. They've had them in the ground for 2 weeks now in high tunnels. Well, you might have a sunny day that you have to vent the high tunnel, but it's still pretty cold out, 30 degrees out or so. So if you have a little tiny transplant, you crack the sides up, the wind's still going to come in and cool those plants down, and you can actually get some cold injury just from those cool winds coming in. So since then, we've learned from the hog guys and the chicken guys and girls, we use drop-down curtains, where you can actually just got a little crank thing, and instead of raising the sides up if you need to vent them, you start venting them at the hip board or halfway up. So you're venting way up here instead of down where that transplant's going to get that cold blast of air. So we've learned a lot, but ventilation is very important. Typical high tunnel, though, this is probably a 20. Most of them are 30 by 96s. What's really gained this in popularity, USDA has the EQIP program. Some of you livestock folks may have participated in. My cattle guys, they get money for watering things and fences to keep them out of the creeks. EQIP also has a high tunnel program. It might be going away, so if you're interested in getting involved in that EQIP program, I'd visit your USDA folks right now and at least get the paperwork started. If it's already started, you're still in the running if what they do with that program. But you can get a high tunnel put on your farm with some cost share through the EQIP program. That's what's gained in popularity. But most of those are 30 by 96. So if you go to the USDA, sign up for the EQIP high tunnel, more than likely it's going to be a 30 by 96. But you can make them any length, width, whatever to fit your operation. The whole key to comparing to field production. Dr. Kleinhenz put this slide together. In Ohio, in the field on produce, vegetable crops, very narrow planting window, very narrow harvest window. I mean, you're making all your money here. With high tunnels, we've just extended that. That's what we want to do. We've extended our planting season. We've extended that harvest season. And we've learned enough now since Matt first developed this slide. This could almost be a solid green line. My wife and I, we have a 40-acre vegetable farm down in Wilmington. My boys are all off to college now, so we've cut back quite a bit. But we were harvesting for a winter CSA, or Community Support Agriculture. We were harvesting spinach, beets, radishes, turnips, collard greens, you name it, all season long. Sure, they'd freeze because they were unheated, so they'd freeze in the nighttime, but then that sun came out, warmed it up. My boys have had to go in and shovel the snow away from the doors for we could go into the high tunnel to do our harvest for the day. But you know, once that sun comes in, because it's passively heated, things warm up real quick, thaw out, quality's really good. But that's what we're mainly doing, is just extending that harvest season. And this line, depending on your cropping mix and your market, could almost be extended year-round. The trick to the fall production is this window. You would think, oh, we can, in a high tunnel, we can plant radishes and turnips clear up into October, November. Well, the limiting factor we have here in Ohio is light. So no matter how warm that house is, that high tunnel is, we still need to get these winter crops planted in August and early September. You get much later than late September, they're just not going to grow because we're lacking in sunlight. I mentioned my farmers already have some tomatoes in the tunnels already. Down in southern Ohio, we started getting our light around Valentine's Day. So that's the magic number that we can actually transplant tomatoes in our high tunnels right around Valentine's Day. Now those are modified high tunnels, which we'll talk about modified high tunnels here in a little bit. Here is Suzanne's greenhouse she put in there in downtown Dayton, but this was an old vacant lot. What was it, Suzanne? A school, right? That they knocked the school down? Yeah, it was a school that they demolished. Now we have a high tunnel there. We're producing food for that community, and some of the folks are even selling it to some of the local white tablecloth restaurants in there. So you can do high tunnels anywhere and get some crop out of them. What can be grown? You can grow anything. Is it economically feasible? That's another question, but you can literally grow anything in a high tunnel. We've had cherry trees in high tunnels. We've had, I said corn and soybeans. We're growing corn and soybeans. Great yields. My gosh, those plants are gigantic, but economically feasible is the question here. And it all depends on your market. The biggest producers, biggest profit producers are those crops that we can harvest from the airspace. Steak tomatoes, indeterminate steak tomatoes. Those are the ones that just keep growing and growing and growing. Tomatoes are the number one because you're harvesting that airspace. I told you we did strawberry work. We can get strawberries on Valentine's Day or the end of February, but we're only growing them on the flat, only on the ground. So we can only harvest so many strawberries when you're talking just growing them on the flat or on the bare ground. We got to go up with them. So that's why I just received some USDA funding. And we're looking at growing in some gutters and towers. We got all kinds of things going on right now. If we can harvest airspace, we can make money in a tunnel. So, but you might be able to make it on radishes. If you got a high value CSA that needs some winter production, you might be able to make money. It just depends on your operation. But the biggest money makers harvest airspace. Tomatoes are it. Tomatoes are the biggest one right now. But there are others depending on your operation. We already talked about we can extend the season, we can start crops earlier, and then gives that winter protection. We could have never grown greens, radishes, spinach in December and January, harvest them in the field. We can do it in the tunnel.
Why do you have a question mark behind hops?
Oh, question mark behind. Because the darn things grow 20 foot tall. So we're going to have a 20 foot tall high tunnel. Hops, we're going to talk about hops here in the next hour or so, but hops just grow really, really tall. But we're working on it. Believe me, I'm working with getting some funding through a greenhouse company right now where we're looking at maybe the future of medicinal marijuana isn't as bright as what we're thinking it is right now. So there's going to be a lot of greenhouses and high tunnels that may not have a crop in them. We're trying to tweak hops to maybe grow in these. And we're 5-10 years out, but stay tuned on that one. But it's usually the height is what's killing us. Most of them are 12 foot tall to the peak. We'd have to have a 20 plus foot. I bet you they're going to grow a lot taller. Then they'd start going down. Yeah, that's another whole 5 years from now, we'll talk about it. But we got to go here, get through this in the next few minutes. But lots of advantages. This is the big one. Y'all are familiar with the disease triangle. That's how crops get disease, right? The pathogens are already blowing around. We got the crop that's going to get the disease. Usually we can modify the environment, whether it's temperature or leaf wetness. What have we just done in a tunnel? We just controlled the leaf. Mother Nature's not going to rain on it. We're playing Mother Nature now. So we can actually protect those crops from wind and rain, and the quality of a raspberry is so much more better grown in a tunnel compared to outside. Just that wind blowing and the leaves scratching it up out in the field makes the quality a lot reduced compared to high tunnel production. So that's the key. But it can also be a hindrance because we've just shut off Mother Nature. We have to water. One more management thing we have to do. So you almost have to have irrigation in combination with a high tunnel or it's not going to work. There is a potential to reduce your diseases, but then inside these tunnels, because of humidity, if we're not ventilating right, we can get some other weird-looking diseases we don't get in the field can actually come into the high tunnel. So it can actually increase some diseases. And then the increase for soil-borne pathogens. Sclerotinia stem rot. Fungal pathogen, usually we don't see it in the field at all. On peppers, beans, tomatoes. Okay, what I tell you the highest profit crop is in these in a high tunnel? Tomatoes, right? I've got some of my farmers been doing tomatoes after tomatoes after tomatoes for 15 years. You're going to have sclerotinia build up, and that just is a wipeout for any type of tomato crop, pepper crop, green bean crop, anything in there. So you can actually increase the risk of disease with high tunnels if you don't watch it. Potential for higher yields. Almost all of our crops get higher yields in there. And basically, like I said, all crops can be grown in a high tunnel. Modest to significant capital expense, depending on how many bells and whistles you put on it. You got the logistics of pulling that cover, or we call it tarping, pulling the tarp over the high tunnel. That's just skinning the plastic or skinning the tunnel with the plastic. That takes a lot of hands. Believe me, we've skinned many down at Piketon. Some of my guys on my crew, plus I'm a pretty big guy, never fails. The wind's not blowing, you go and start pulling that poly, and as soon as you get it up over top the tunnel, the winds kick in. And we've actually picked 3 or 4 of us up off the ground if the wind gets underneath there. So it's a real pain to skin these tunnels. And then you got to get rid of the plastic, you got to replace it. We just lost a bunch. A bunch of my farmers lost a bunch of plastic here 2 weekends ago when those storms came through. It just can't hold up to a lot of these massive storms. Monitoring the temperature, ventilation, insect disease management, snow. I'll show you a picture. We have 3-season tunnels and we have 4-season tunnels. 3-season are built very light and do not put up with any snow load. So you got to de-skin that by November 1st. You don't want any snow on it. 4 seasons, you can do it, but if it's unheated, you know how we get ice storms? That ice starts, I lost one at my house because of this. The ice starts accumulating, then you get snow on top of it, and it doesn't slide off, then the whole thing collapses. So there is potential for that, but I call it 24/7 babysitting. You are literally out there. You don't sleep worth a darn, especially when you got a crop in there, because you're just thinking, what could go wrong tonight? And you're out there trying to make sure the heaters are working, and it's a lot of babysitting when you get into this. Some basic considerations. We've had high tunnel workshops for 2 days, so we're not going to cover everything in 30 minutes here. How are we doing on time, Curtis?
About 8 minutes.
Okay, we can get through it here. Drainage is the big one. I had a bunch of my farmers call here in the last 2 weeks with these big rains we've been getting down south, 3-4 inch rains. When you have a 30 by 96 structure with a 1 inch rain on it, that structure is shedding 1,728 gallons of water. If you have 3 inches, that's a lot of water that's coming off and going right to the sides. Some of the folks that didn't listen to us, we always suggest excavating your pad that you're going to build this on, for it's a little bit higher than the surrounding area of the farm. Those that just put it on the flat, guess where all that water went? Right inside these tunnels. They had tomatoes planted, all the water went inside. A lot of them lost a lot of these tomatoes already. So that's the number one thing I tell everybody. I think I told Jamie this coming up. If you're going to build a tunnel, set it up on top of a raised pad just so you can eliminate this drainage issue, because this is the problem. Besides weather, this is the problem. Putting tile drainage all around the perimeter. There's plans you can even capture that water coming off in gutters, storm and storage tanks. I work real close with Wilmington College down in Clinton County. They have a high tunnel where they're actually collecting the water off of the high tunnel, putting it in the storage tanks. That's what they irrigate out of. So there's all different things you can do. Prepare the site well in advance. Get rid of all your perennial weeds. Reduce your annual weed seed bank. Watch herbicides. If somebody was growing grain on there before, and then you go to put that, watch what corn herbicides were used. Watch what soybean herbicides were used. Watch how much Roundup and when that Roundup was applied. Roundup, chemicals, herbicides in a tunnel do not get along well. Just don't do it, because the herbicide doesn't go away. It just keeps floating around in there. Unlike in the field, it'll dissipate. It does not dissipate in a tunnel. And then always try to keep your weeds from blowing in, keep them out of there. There's my poor farm up in Lake County. He's done. He's not going to do no high tunnels. He's went to permanent greenhouses, but he's not doing the high tunnels no more. This was just a major wind event coming off the lake, and it happened time and time again. Larry's not going to do it. Here's Matt's movable tunnel. He put little wheels on it. There's all different kinds of ways you can do it, but he can move that tunnel in and out, depending if he's putting it on beds. He can put it in his field. He can do his field prep, pull it back over top of the field. This is that 3-season tunnel. Doesn't have a lot of strength. The bows are a lot less diameter and so forth, but now, here maybe in a couple weeks, you'd go April 1st, put the plastic on. Hopefully you don't get a snowstorm. By November 1st, you take it off, and it just helps strawberries that we have planted in there. Maybe get an early tomato crop. A little cheaper to put up, cover a lot of acres, but you're only going to get 3 seasons out of it. Different ways we could control the weeds, though, since we're not using herbicides. We use plastic mulch, put straw between the mulch, make sure the straw is clean, you don't have a bunch of weed seeds in there, or you just made a heck of a mess for yourself. There's one of my farmers down in Jackson County. They just till in between the rows and just use black plastic mulch only. This is a good picture to show. This is a modified high tunnel. Brandon and Julie Weber, this is their place. You see the horizontal airflow fans up there? They have their tomatoes planted already. They're after that very early market, so they need heat, and they're also circulating that air to keep the disease at bay. So, and they also have exhaust fans and exhaust vents on there. So that's a modified tunnel where you have all the bells and whistles in there. There's just another where they put some cover crops in between that 3-season. Weed fabric all the way across the tunnel, and plastic mulch with weed fabric between. It's going to cost you $8,600 to $10,000 for a 30 by 96, depending on the bells and whistles again. I already talked about the modified tunnels. You don't have to have permanent heating. You could do temporary heating. This is one of my farmers just brings in this temporary propane heater on a skid. If he gets a cold night, he'll just bring that in, hook it up to a tank, and he can keep these tomatoes alive, get him through those 1 or 2 nights it might get cold. A lot of my Amish and Mennonite farmers, they heat with wood. They don't have electricity, so they're just using these hot water boilers. This one they took out of a school, an old school that was getting tore down, and they're heating the soil and the base of the plant right down close to the soil, and they can get good growth of that. Here where they got the hot water heat and some temporary heat. It's going to get pretty cold that night, so they brought in some temporary propane heaters. Don't need soil, just like Suzanne and I's tunnel in Dayton. We didn't use that soil. We built raised beds in there to grow the produce on. So one of my farmers down in Wheelersburg, Furman Orchards, this is how they grow their tomatoes in their high tunnel. Again, a modified high tunnel, but they're just growing them in bags, and we researched that back in '96 as well. Basic components, just like a barn. Got your ribs, got your poles, got your ground stakes, hip boards, baseboards. We'll just fly through this, show you a quick how you build them. We've spent days on this, but we'll just go through. Get the site prep, pound your ground stakes, put your bows up. The bows are assembled on a flat, level area of soil. They just insert in there. You put metal screws, shoot screws in there. Then you put your hip boards on, put your wind bracing and your purlins. Wind bracing keeps it from twisting. There's your hip boards. Put your vents in. Peak vents are a key, and a lot of my farmers are now doing big peak vents that go across the entire peak of the greenhouse just to get that ventilation in there. Skinning the tunnel, just get lots of people to do it. Buy lots of beer to keep them helping you and keep them there for when the winds do pick them up. They're not too mad at you. Drop down curtains, roll up sides. That's the drop-down curtains there. Not a good site. Do your prep work in advance. This is not a good site for a high tunnel. This guy's not going to be very successful. Watch the snow load. We don't want to put them right next to each other. If it's a 30-foot wide house, we want about 30 feet between houses, just for we do get big snows. They don't collapse each other. Drainage is important. Like I said, get your water and electric if you are going to do modified. I think we did her. All of our research results are on our southcenters.osu.edu. Click on horticulture. You can get high tunnel stuff. You can get hop stuff. VegNet is our OSU blog that we have, and we're always posting almost weekly things that are going on in the vegetable industry in Ohio. So you may want to subscribe to our VegNet blog. But other than that, any questions?
Let's give Brad a